Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here today. Welcome to this Romania presentation. My name is Kalen Dragoe, and I have the pleasure to introduce today's session. Again, thank you for being here today. It's great to see so many of you here. The idea of this presentation started last year when Romania's regulator, NAMRA, announced the 11th licensing round. And at that time, we intended to organize a conference here in Calgary between Romania's regulator and Canadian energy companies and maybe investors. Now, things have dragged on between political changes in Romania and a pandemic in the past couple of months. So for more than 6 months now, this process dragged on, and hopefully it will find its footing at some point. Raid and I talked a few times about this presentation over the past year. We feel that now is the right time to approach this in an online format, which a lot of people are doing today. So here we are today. We are fortunate to have a few great speakers from different disciplines and regions, from Romania to Montreal and Calgary. And they will be taking on different aspects of the energy business in Romania from different vantage points, from operators, regulators, support, and service. I would very much like to thank CGEF for offering to host this web event and for placing this opportunity in Romania in front of their audience of Canadian explorers and investors. With this, I will pass the virtual microphone to David. David Johnson is a director with CGEF, and he will introduce today's speakers and their presentations. So over to you, David.
Great. Thank you so much, Callan. So welcome to the webinar, Romania, Opportunities in Oil and Gas. I'm David Johnson. I'll be your moderator for this morning's webinars. Before we begin, there are a few housekeeping issues to take care of. There'll be 4 talks. Raid ATTIR of OIA Consulting will speak on Romanian hydrocarbon potential. Peter Baumann of Highmark Energy will show us the sedimentary basins of Romania. Calvin Brackman of SERINUS Energy will bring us to the economic realities of Romanian gas market. And Verena Radu of CMS Energyonomics will outline the upcoming Round 11 oil and gas tender process. After the talks, there will be a question and answer panel. Please submit your Q&As using the Q&A function. You'll find it in the center bottom of your window. Please start your question with the presenter's name or the order of the talk so that we're able to address your question to the presenter. During the talk, microphones will be muted to reduce noise levels, and cameras will be turned off to maintain bandwidth. Callan of Chinook Consultants will be gathering your questions, and we'll be getting through as many of those questions as we can in the Q&A. After the webinar, a copy of the webinar will be posted on the CGEF website, so you can return to it and find the presentations there. In addition, you'll receive a survey, and we would really appreciate your input on that survey. So without further delay, I'll introduce our first speaker. So Raid ATTIR of OIA Consulting is the founder and managing director of OIA. Raid holds a master's degree in business administration, is a professional engineer with APEGA and with Ordre d'Ingénieurs du Québec. He works in engineering and oil field operations. He was involved in large-scale operations with Schlumberger, ExxonMobil, BP, and Shell. Raid worked in 8 countries across 4 continents: Algeria, Libya, Egypt, Oman, UAE, Iraq, Romania, and Canada. And so with that, Raid, please take us away.
Thank you very much, Dave. So thanks to all for joining us in this webinar. I'll be presenting you a brief description about Romania's hydrocarbon potential. My presentation will pave the floor for the other speakers to elaborate more on certain subjects that I'll be touching on. And I'll be talking a little bit about the history of the oil and gas industry in Romania, as well as some of the key players, and we'll touch on some of the fiscal and regulatory frameworks for acquiring concessions in Romania. I'll be just for the presentation, Basia, if I can open the presentation. Yeah, okay, perfect. So I'll begin with the Romania's just for the first slide. Basha, probably we have a problem in control. Okay, so the oil and gas industry began in the mid-1850s in Romania, where Romania actually was the first country to record officially oil production. They recorded more than 250 tons of oil production, and they built the first oil refinery in the world. As well as Bucharest was the first city to be illuminated with kerosene lamps, where they installed 1,000 kerosene lamps in Romania's and Bucharest streets. For the next slide. And in the early 1900s, this is when the gas discovery began. It was in the Sarmasel field in the Mureș County, somewhere central Romania. And when they put gas into production, they built actually the first European pipeline that extended from this field discovery to the nearby city of Turda. And next slide. Okay. And then in the mid of the 20th century, this is where some technology implementation began, and Romania, they started with the wireline logging and some of the improved oil and gas recovery through water injection and gas injection. Okay. And in the mid 70s, this is when Romania started to explore more of its offshore potential, and they built the first offshore platform. And they made their first oil discovery in the Lebada field in 1979, and they sold the first oil in 87. And in the 2012, this is where they explored more on their deep water potential, and they made one of the largest, if not the largest, gas discovery in the Black Sea, in the Neptune field, where they discovered anywhere between 40 to 80 BCM of gas. So given that now it's important to know as well who are the key regulators in Romania. So we're going to start with 5 main regulators that are very important to Canadian E&Ps. First, the Ministry of Energy. And the Ministry of Energy, they enact the regulations, and as well they establish the short-term and long-term energy strategy for the country. And they execute these strategies through 2 execution arms, which are the NAMERE, as Kalin mentioned earlier, and as well as ANRE. NAMERE is the National Agency for Mineral Resources, and it regulates all upstream activities, and as well it organizes the licensing rounds, in which Varinia will be explaining a little bit more about the upcoming licensing round. Also in the NRA, which regulates the midstream and downstream activities, and this is very important for gas producers because they also regulate the gas market. Also, we have the ANP, which is the Agency for Environmental Protection, and they manage and organize all environmental assessments and as well impact studies. And whenever it comes to actually establishing surface facilities and building and accessing utilities and as well getting land permits and building permits, this is where ENPs needs to reach out to city halls and county councils. It's important also to look at who are the main companies in Romania, and I'll just touch on 2 major companies, which I call them national oil companies, although they are no more national because they have been privatized during the process of Romania to privatize its public sector. So OMV Petrom, or actually Petrom was the major oil producer in Romania, and in 2004 it has been privatized, where the Austrian group OMV has acquired 51% stakes in the company, yet the state still owns 20% of it. And when we look at Romgaz, which is the largest southeastern European gas producer, it underwent a privatization process in 2013. However, the state still controls 70% of it, and this reflects the strategic importance of natural gas in Romania. And when we look at why it's important to have this strategic control on natural gas, because the EU is striving to actually become more energy independent, and Romania is considered as one of the major energy suppliers to the EU. And Romania became a member in 2007. And during this process, they had to actually harmonize and standardize all their laws and regulations with the directive from the European Parliament. And this included the petroleum law and as well what we call the energy law, which govern the utility, electricity, and natural gas market. Now, Romania produces more than 70,000 barrels of oil per day, and as well as almost 10 BCM of gas per year. It stands at a high rank in Europe, probably thanks to Brexit, because Romania gained one level up. However, despite this relatively high numbers when it comes to EU oil and gas production, we can see that Romania's oil and gas production has been in a continuous decline since the late 70s and early 80s for both oil and gas. And despite having 1/3 of the EU's oil and gas workforce and more than 400 oil and gas deposits, they have more than 13,000 active wells in Romania, yet the production is relatively low. And we can see that the productivity per well is one of the lowest in Europe. And this is the reason, because most of the Romania's oil and gas deposits are small, fragmented, and as well are now in a depleted stage. This is due to lack of investment and as well some technology implementation, despite that new projects were not able to offset this production decline. And this has caused a problem to Romania because it started to have a larger and larger gap of energy trade deficit. And currently, Romania imports almost 85% of its oil demand for its local market, and as well anywhere between 15 to 20% of its gas demand. And that's why Romania now is starting to open up and would like to explore a little bit more on its potential in order to boost this production and to become more sufficient internally, and as well to be one of the major suppliers to the EU. However, despite this decline in oil production, but there are some major discoveries that were made. And I'll talk on the ROM gas they made in 2016, the largest onshore discovery in 30 years. And they discovered around 30 BCM of gas when they tested deeper structures, because most of the current producing fields are shallow, relatively shallow, which is around 2,000 meters. And as well, OMV Petrom, jointly with Hunt Oil, they made also an oil discovery by testing 2 layers at the depth of 2,500 meters. And it's worth mentioning that as of 2015, there are a total of 16,000 kilometers square of 3D seismic surveys. However, most of them are located anywhere between, are surveyed anywhere between 1,000 to 3,500 meters. And that's why deeper structure were not really explored. And based on a study that Deloitte has commissioned, it's estimated that Romania deep onshore potential can have a gas reserve of up to 600 BCM. And that's why exploring Romania's deep onshore would be considered as one of the most attractive opportunities in Romania. Now, how can E&P companies access this potential? So there are 2 licensing rounds, 2 licensing processes that are governed by NAMERE, which is the upstream regulator. So the first one, I'll be just touching on it briefly, and Vania can explain a little bit more about it. First, the exploration license. And usually NAMERE publishes a tender and invites for, publishes the licensing round, and E&P companies need to submit their offer. They get access to the data package, and they need to prove their fiscal as well as financial and technical ability, and they submit the offers. And when the offer is being awarded to the winning company, it needs to get government approval. And then if the foreign entity doesn't have any presence in Romania, they need to establish a subsidiary within 90 days. Now, most of these concessions are actually signed for a period of 30 years with a potential, or up to 30 years with the potential of a 15 years extension. There are also some other blocks that are given on a non-exclusive basis that are not required to go through a tender process, and they are granted on a 3 years period. And when it comes to the other type of process, which is license, which is the development and production license, this is where the E&P company need to evaluate its reserves and submit this reserve evaluation to NAMERE. Once NAMERE confirms these reserves, they actually go and submit their delineation plan, and they acquire all the environmental and as well the permits to expand, to develop the field. And once this field is being developed, we need to look at the current infrastructure in Romania. Romania, when it comes to its oil and gas pipeline, they have a more comprehensive, probably, gas network. But Romania has almost 4,000 kilometers of oil pipeline and more than 13,000 kilometers of natural gas pipelines. And when we look at the natural gas, there are some discussions actually to connect this gas pipeline with the Central European transport system, and as well as with some regional pipelines that come from, for example, the pipeline that comes from the Caspian Sea and as well from the Eastern Mediterranean. So this will add more export ability to E&Ps that would operate in Romania. However, this is what we have for now. But also the EU, as I mentioned, they are actually, they want to have more energy independence, and they want to rely on more EU countries to satisfy their oil and gas need. So in 2017, the EU has financed a regional pipeline that connects Romania's Black Sea to a gas compression facility in Austria. And this pipeline will cross 4 countries, which are Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, and Austria. And this is where the name BRUA came from. And this pipeline will have an initial capacity of 1.7 BCM per year. And once production will ramp up from offshore projects and probably onshore projects, it will go up to 4.4 BCM per year. Now, once we start producing, so we need to look at what are the fiscal regime of Romania. Romania, it has the royalties system that is anywhere between 13 to 13.5 for oil and 3 to 13.5% for oil and 3 to 13% for gas. And this is subject to the amount of oil or gas production that the E&P company is producing. Also, there are corporate taxes of 16% applied on EBT, and as well there's a value-added tax. This is usually for petroleum products and for refined products. Other taxes, which we have the special tax, a 0.5% on oil revenue, and this is applicable until end of next year. And as well, there's a windfall gain tax, and anywhere between 60 to 80% once the gas produced is being sold at some achieve a certain price. And Calvin will be talking more about it because SERINUS has been also producing gas in Romania, so he has more to elaborate on this subject. Besides this, we have also land and other administrative taxes, access to land, withholding taxes, wage contribution, and so on. And by this, I'll just conclude with the 11th licensing round, which Varenya will be explaining to you a little bit more about it. But in July 2019, the NAMERE announced the general terms of its upcoming licensing round. And this is the first licensing round that is taking place since 10 years. So it presents a great opportunity for Canadian E&Ps to explore on Romania's oil and gas potential. There will be 28 blocks offered, 22 onshore and 6 offshore. The size would vary anywhere between 650 kilometers square to 1,000 square kilometers. And you can find on Chinook as well, they published on their website a comprehensive guide about these blocks, their location, and some maps. And by this, I'll just conclude and give it back to Dave. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. That was great. So those of you that have questions for Raed, now would be the time to send them in, and note that Raed is the person that you'd like to ask the question of. Our next speaker is Peter Baumann of Highmark Energy, who's going to speak on sedimentary basins of Romania. Peter is a professional geoscientist with experience in North America, South America, Europe, Australia, Western Asia, North Africa, and the Middle East. Peter holds an MSc from the University of Calgary in geology and geophysics, and Peter is a president of AAPG Canada region, a member of CSPG, and a PEGA. He is also director of CGEF. Peter, and with that, I'll turn over the platform to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dave. I appreciate that. Just trying to. So yeah, thank you for giving me the opportunity to briefly share with you the geography of Romanian sedimentary and oil and gas basins. So Romania is one of the most prolific oil and gas producing regions in Central and Eastern Europe, and Reid touched on that as they've been actively exploring and producing since the mid-1800s. So Romania has 7 main sedimentary basins with a total land area of almost 240,000. To date, there's approximately 950 oil and gas fields discovered, and almost or over almost half a trillion billion barrels of oil produced, and 50 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. So where is Romania? In the upper right-hand corner, we've got, you can make out in yellow here, the translucent yellow is Romania. Sitting on the western edge of the Black Sea, you can make out the Mediterranean Sea and the rest of Europe. To the left here, we've got the country outline in the thicker gray line, with the basin outlines in the relatively thinner gray outline. So working in a clockwise direction, starting off in the west, we've got the Pannonian Basin. Just adjacent to that, the Transylvanian Basin. North of that, the Northern Carpathian Basin. To the southeast, Pre-Dobruja, and then off to the offshore, the Black Sea Basin. West of that, the Moesian Platform, and the north of that, the Southern Carpathian Basin. So how that translates to oil and gas provinces, or sometimes called basins, there's 9 unique oil and gas provinces, and I'll go into more detail in future slides here. So each basin is very unique, with different reservoir depths and trapping styles. And so quickly, again, some of the names are the same, some are different as we move into the oil and gas producing provinces. Again, the country boundary here in gray, and the basin outlines in the thinner gray, with the different shades of green outlining the different basins. So the Pannonian off to the west, again, adjacent to that, separated by the Southern Carpathian Mountains, the Transylvanian. Then separated by the Eastern Carpathians, we've got the Moldovan Platform. And south of that, the Eastern Carpathian Foredeep or Miocene Zone. Just to the east of that, the North Dobrujian Zone. And then again, the Western Black Sea oil and gas basin. West to the Moesian Platform. And north of that, we've got the Diapir's Fold Zone. And just west, the Gatic Depression. So in a little bit more detail, so now we're on the northwest portion of Romania, and just highlighting 3 of the oil and gas basins. The Pannonian Basin's a back arc basin, and it mainly produces, it's a oil and gas, natural gas prone source rocks, with mainly oil producing out of it, with some subtle shallower gas production. Hydrocarbons typically lie in structural closures related to fault blocks and folds. Just to the west of that, right in the center of the country, is a Transylvanian basin. So again, it's a back arc basin, mainly biogenic gas prone, with hydrocarbons in stacked structural closures. Straight south of that, across the Southern Carpathian Mountains, we've got the Gatic Depression. It's a compressional terrain type basin with Oligocene age oil and gas prone source rocks, and again, reservoirs in structural and stratigraphic traps found in the Miocene level. To the eastern side of the country, to the north, we've got the Eastern Carpathian oil and gas basin. It's again compressional terrain associated with the Eastern Carpathian Mountains. Oil and gas is prevalent throughout this region, and here we see basement-driven structural and stratigraphic traps found mainly in the lower Miocene and Paleogene intervals. Directly south of that, the Diapir's Fold Belt fold zone is the most prolific oil and gas producing region in Romania, with the largest frequency of oil and gas fields, mainly driven by Paleozoic salt flow tectonics. We find oil prone source rocks and hydrocarbons lying in Oligocene to Pliocene anticlines and thrusts and folds. South of that, we've got the Moesian platform extending across and adjacent to the border with Bulgaria. Again, a compressional terrain type basin. Oil and gas is found throughout the region, with structural and stratigraphic traps in multiple intervals from the Paleozoic to the Pliocene. And offshore in the western Black Sea Basin, it's a Cretaceous back arc basin with oil and gas found. Reservoirs are in the found in Mesozoic to Pontian intervals. Water depths in most of the current production is less than 250 meters. So places to look, explore, develop, and redevelop. The Pannonian Basin has abundant subtle shallow traps. There's very few Cretaceous or deeper Paleozoic fields, but large seismic, 3D seismic coverage, but with little development in the deeper fields. It's got a lot of infrastructure through these shallow fields, and it's in very close proximity, and it's largely underexploited, but does require some modernization of imaging through seismic. Another key region would be the Eastern Carpathians. We've got, as I touched on, there's numerous shallow Miocene-aged fields here, but with a lot of, or very little deeper development or exploring. So we've got the shallow infrastructure, but with many of the deeper structures currently imaged but undrilled to date. Another key area is the Western Black Sea. It's very underexplored, relatively shallow water depth, and the opportunity for very large contiguous blocks with good terms. And again, another key area is it's no secret that Romania has a very prolific source rock producing interval, multiple producing intervals, and the unconventionals is just starting in the region, with some more work required to understand source maturity, frackability, brittleness, to move that resource along. So that's all I had. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Peter. Really appreciate that. So with regard to questions and answers, please use the chat function and direct your questions to all the panelists, and then that will be taken by Callan, and we'll put it all together. Okay, with that done, our next speaker will be Calvin BRACKMAN. And Calvin's going to bring us into the Romanian gas market and some of the economic realities of Romania. Calvin holds a master's in economics from the University of Waterloo and a degree in economics from the University of Calgary. Calvin worked in the public sector with the Department of Natural Resources and Northwest Territories Minerals and Oil and Gas divisions, and in the private sector for Petro-Kazakhstan as a Director of Government Relations and SERINUS. So with that, please, Calvin, take us forward. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, David. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and thank CGEF for organizing this. I know they put in a lot of hard work. Before I start, I just want to talk about SERINUS Energy. We are in Romania. We're actually in Romania and Tunisia. And in Romania, we brought on the Moftino gas project last April. It's in the Pannonian Basin in the northwest corner of Romania. And we just released our Q1, and we exited Q1 at the end of March at 12 million, just over 12 million cubic feet per day, having brought on our Moftino 1004 well in February. So it's been a great project. It's been great for the company, and I'm excited here to talk about how it fits in Romania and what are the opportunities and challenges going forward. As I said, Raed in his presentation gave described how rich the petroleum industry and the history of the petroleum industry is in Romania, and I won't go too much over that. Just show some of these photos, and as you can see, HSE has come a long way, and it's been oh, sorry, it's awfully sensitive. The industry has been it's a major employer for Romanians. The expertise and services for the oil industry are well established in the country, and for SERINUS, all our in-country staff are Romanians, and I think that's important to us, and we really appreciate all their effort and their expertise and all the work they did to bring on the Moftino gas development project. Now I'll move into the Romanian gas market and the European market, and I just have a few graphs here to show how, and starting with the first one, here's the monthly gas production in the European Union. And as you can see, a lot of it's driven by the Netherlands, and I have the United Kingdom in here, but it's after Brexit, they were no longer part of the EU, and that makes, as you can see over here, Romania is the second largest producer of gas in the EU. And here, as for the EU, they don't have enough domestic gas production to meet their demand, so they have to import a significant amount of gas. And as you can see, Germany kind of dominates, but pretty much every country imports gas to meet their energy needs. And then here's, and then consumption as well. And as you can see, it's very, very seasonal consumption, and it's been relatively steady going forward. For the net imports into Europe, as you can see, Russia is a significant, they import a significant amount of gas from Russia, Norway. LNG has been becoming, a lot more LNG has been coming into the EU, and then there's some other producers. And I raise this as well as for the European Union, energy security is a significant issue that they are trying to deal with in going forward, and particularly when it comes to gas, and really trying to diverse their supply, and also encourage more production within the EU if possible. And for the sort of trends going on in Europe, there was a 64% increase in LNG imports in 2019 versus 2018, which is a significant growth rate. And of course, having all this new gas supply come in has started to put downward pressure on the natural gas price in Europe, the TTF price going from a high of $7.40 in October of 2018 to $3.84 per MCF at the end of the year. And now with the obviously the demand being constrained by the coronavirus, it's dropped as low as $1.85 an MCF. But LNG, with its high costs of about $6.50 per MCF, making it the marginal MCF in the European market. And since March, 30 LNG cargoes bound for Europe have been canceled. And another thing that's assisting natural gas is the EU emissions trading scheme, which has really created a positive for gas in replacing coal for electricity generation. Now for the Romanian gas market, as you can see, this line here is the consumption, and obviously very seasonal. And you can see the production has been steady, but declining a little bit every year. And then their need for imports to meet their consumption has been pretty seasonal until last summer, where actually imports continued throughout the year. Here's the gas price, and this is the reason the imports continued through 2019. Is there was, as the European price started to decrease in 2019, the Romanian price held steady and even grew. So it attracted kept the import pipelines at capacity, and the price in Romania was significantly higher, as much as 30, at times 40 to 50% to 30% higher than the European price, which for SERINUS Energy, that was very positive as we brought in our gas project in April, and we're able to benefit from these high prices. As Raed also said, the natural gas market in Romania is dominated by OMV, Petrom, and Romgas, with a significant amount. And then there's some small producers that provide production as well. And obviously for Romania, an important aspect going forward is the development of their offshore gas resources. And the Media project by Black Sea Oil and Gas and Partners is currently under construction, and it'll have first gas by late 2021, and I believe they're still on schedule. But they've had a lot of controversy with ExxonMobil deciding to exit the Romanian offshore. A lot of this was the government of Romania. The offshore laws that they passed, ExxonMobil didn't feel it was conducive to the risks, and in order for them to make an investment. And of course, with the offshore coming on, it will connect with the Brua pipeline that Raed discussed as well, and that should open up Romania to become a gas market hub for Europe, not only providing its own supplies for export, but being a transit country as well. The onshore gas production, there's a low well productivity. It is a very mature and developed gas region. Taxation, as Raed mentioned, the windfall tax is particularly burdensome on the onshore producers, and it's just most of how it's constructed as a tax. It graduates from about 60% of the gas price. Above that goes to the tax, and you're only allowed to write off 30% of that amount from your capital spent. So you can. It's not really a windfall tax as a very onerous tax, as you're not guaranteed to return your capital, and that's in definition what a windfall tax should be designed for, and earn a rate of return. Access to data, it's classified. It's a state secret. Actually, a lot of the data. Land access is an issue, just given it's mostly even on say large 3D projects that there's small land holdings. So we have an upcoming 3D seismic project of 148 square kilometers, and within that area we have 6,000 landowners that we have to reach agreement with. So it can be quite a long and burdensome process, but we have this will be our third 3D, so it can be done, and it has been successful. And there's always talk of improving the petroleum law. And as in the conclusions, Romania is an emerging gas hub that can enhance the energy security of Europe with new pipelines. Market liberalization should help, and interconnectedness to allow the Romanian price to converge with the European price. And obviously they're very focused on the Black Sea, but it would be great to see the government really start to encourage and bring in policies that will help the onshore producer, especially talking about the deep gas potential in Romania with the windfall tax. That could be that could make those developments marginal. And the best way to keep the price in Romania the best for consumers is to encourage increased production, and not just try to tax on the put taxes on gas because you think the producers are making windfalls. As SERINUS, the money we make, we want to put into the ground. We want to have more jobs, create more development, and try to grow our business. And as a small company, we need to mostly do that through cash flow, and it really kind of slows down our development plans. And we'd like to see policies that encourage. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, Calvin.
Hey,
so that was great. Please send in your questions, address them to Calvin. And our fourth and final speaker is Verena Radu of CMS Energy Economics. Verena is head of oil and gas in Central Eastern Europe and deputy head of CE Energy Products and Construction Practice Group. Verena advises on oil and gas, renewables, and power deals in Romania, and was involved in drafting the legislation initiatives in the energy sector. She advises on the largest Romanian joint ventures in the petroleum sector and M&A deals in the power market. Verena specializes in assisting clients in applications and public bids for petroleum and mining concessions in Romania. And so with that, Verena, I'll pass it over to you.
Hello everyone. Thank you, David. Thank you very much, CJ, for organizing and for inviting me, and everyone else. I'm the last, hopefully, the last speaker. Hopefully I'll keep you interested with some of the news from the ground here. I've been an energy lawyer, especially oil and gas is my specialty for the last 20 years, and I have seen the market growing, let's say, from the unbundling until the, let's say, how the market looks now, privatizations and opening up the market, including all the bid rounds that have been organized after 2000. Let me see if the slides are working. Right, so I work for CMS, which is an international law firm. We have about 5,000 lawyers in about 70 offices around the world. Unfortunately not Canada, but hopefully soon. And we have very prominent energy practice, including in all the countries in Central Eastern Europe. And since Romania is one of the largest oil and gas historical place, I coordinate the practice in the 7 countries that we act in around Central Eastern Europe, from Poland to Bulgaria, Ukraine, Hungary, Czech Republic, and a few others. I'd like to talk about the newly announced, actually last year announced 11th round. I know there's been a lot of interest because unfortunately we haven't had a bid round since 10 years, since 2010. Just as a snapshot of how the activity looks like now, we have had 10 licensing rounds since '96. We have about 40 active agreements in exploration, development and production, including 8 offshore blocks. Most of the production comes from about 400 blocks, commercial fields. And as it was said before by my previous speakers, most of the production is concentrated between OMV Petrom and Romgaz. But during the last years, we have seen others emerging, such as Amromco, Mazarin, Hunt Oil, and others. The new round has been announced in last July, and it was published in the Romanian official gazette. However, in order to be effective, it needs to be published in the European Journal. As of today, we understand that the government is still looking to pursue this once the state of emergency and alert, which we are now in, are going to be over, which means we are looking at the second part of this quarter or the next quarter to have the bid announced in the European Gazette. That is basically when the clock will start ticking. Once that is published, then National Agency for Mineral Resources, as Raid was described, is the competent body to organize these tenders. They will organize the data room based on the request of interested parties. There will be 120 days for preparation of the offers. NAMAR will then evaluate the bids within 30 days. And then there will be negotiations on the awards and the negotiations for the petroleum agreements. On the left-hand side of this slide are the blocks. It's an image of the blocks that are offered in this license, 22 onshore and the rest offshore. I would have to say that, again, as a last minute information, I understand that the round will only include the onshore blocks because as it was mentioned, I think, by Calvin before, the government is still working on the offshore law, trying to improve the initial form. So most probably there will only be these 22 onshore blocks on offer. On the right-hand side, it's an image of how the map with all the blocks look, including the ones proposed for the round 11. You would see that most of the blocks are around already producing areas. Okay, the blocks vary in size between 650 and about 1,000 square kilometers. You will be able to access the minimum package, data package. Both Romanian and foreign entities can submit such a request to NAMAR based on signing a confidentiality agreement and paying a fee. A certain company may bid for one or more open blocks on behalf of itself, or it can form a consortium. And the bids will include qualification documents and proofs of financial capability, technical capability, a minimum work program for exploration and expenditures, environmental impact mitigation proposal, and some funds allocated for technology and technology transfer and training, which money can be spent both for internal for the company to acquire IT or other type of technology, or can be shared with NAMAR. All offers must be submitted in the Romanian language and comply with the regulations in the tender book. And once awarded, negotiations for the petroleum agreement will start 15 days after the notification to close the negotiations, hopefully less. A few words about the legal regime of the petroleum rights. Romania has a concession type regime. Petroleum agreements concluded between NAMAR, who is the legal representative of the state, and companies for 30 years. The contracts can be extended up to additional 15 years if there is ongoing commercial production. Once concluded, the petroleum agreement needs to be approved by the government in order to become effective. It has been said already that it's a royalty type concession, and I will go through that later on. In the exploration type agreements, there's 2 stages proposed. So there's a minimum exploration program. The total exploration time usually cannot exceed 10 years. With a maximum of 30, as I said. The National Agency of Mineral Resources, I think Raid went into this in extenso, so is mainly the specialized body, the representative, let's say, the main point that you'll be dealing with in terms of day-to-day management of your subsurface operations, whether it's drilling permit, confirmation of reserves, and so on. Whereas for the surface facilities, in terms of gas, you will be dealing with the National Energy Regulatory Authority. As the name says, this is an independent decision-making body, whereas the National Agency for Mineral Resources is an agency reporting directly to the government. So for the surface facilities, whether it's pipeline permits, licenses for trading the gas, reporting your activity, and so on, you'll be dealing with ANRE. All the companies, all the legal entities, once they perform petroleum operation, they must get a certification for operatorship. Of course, in typical JVs in oil and gas, you can have operator and non-operators. For the non-operators, this is not needed, but for the company that is nominated on behalf of JV to operate, you will need to obtain such certification from NAMAR, which is based on technical and management and financial capabilities. You have a snapshot here of the royalties. The royalties vary between 3.5 and 13.5 for oil and 3.5 and 13 for gas, depending on the quarterly production. Besides the corporate tax of 16%, depending on how you're organized, you can pay, you have a tax on profit or a tax on turnover. You have a VAT of 19% and a dividends subject to 5% withholding tax rate. Now there's a discussion about, of course, about many points that have very well raised on the windfall tax. Hopefully, liberalization of the gas market is supposed to be enforced starting July this year. And given the overall need of the government for new investments in this area, the necessity for new discoveries for gas due to the transition to a low carbon energy mix, it may be the case that all of this windfall tax will be removed. Now, going back to the offers for the bids, this is how it looks. This is how it looked before. So I'm giving you an example of how the previous rounds were organized. The proposed minimum exploration program had the most weight of 55 points out of 100, with the mandatory program 35 and the optional 20 points. The time is also an interesting and important criteria. So the longer you offer, the less points you get. And you'll see the rest of financial and technical capabilities are noted, as well as the environmental program and the technology transfer and professional training. You'll have two offers: the qualification documents in an outer envelope and the rest in a closed envelope. And for each parameter, you would have a separate offer separate documents, set of documents. Okay, this was on the 11th bid round. I'm happy to take questions separately or now. In terms of staying in touch with the Romanian energy industry and news about oil and gas, I'd like to present energynomics.ro. Energynomics is a complex media platform that I'm the founding partner for this. We started about 8 years ago, and it's now a complex news and communication platform on energy in Romania. So I encourage you to, if you want to stay abreast with what is happening, we have a website, magazine, events, and all sorts of reports and interviews, which are in English as well, and broadcasted on our LinkedIn and YouTube pages. So I hope this will be useful for you to stay in touch with the news. And please feel free to contact me for further news. Thank you.
Thank you, Verena. Great. So let's move into the question and answer period. We're a little short on time, so if you have to leave, you can always vote with your mouse, and we'll continue with the questions that we have. And what we'll do here is we'll continue through the order in the presentations. We'll start off with Raed, and so there's several questions for Raed. Raed, what are the newer technologies that can benefit the Romanian exploration and development industry?
I would say probably when we talk about the exploration, I think there's a lot of work to be done in the 2D and 3D seismic for deep structures. As I mentioned, not too many, probably only 10% of Romanian sedimentary basins are being covered. So more into the 3D seismic for the exploration side. When it comes to production, we look for more stimulation technologies and probably the automation of artificial lift, and as well some probably new water flooding technologies as well.
Okay, following up on the seismic, can you clarify about the 3D seismic coverage and whether the data has had enough time to provide good recordings at depth? And then what is the prospectivity of the deeper?
I would say probably, as I mentioned, when it comes to deep reserves, and I would probably give it to Kalim. Probably he has more to elaborate on this one. I don't know, Kalim, would you like to comment on this? Do we have Kalim? Yeah.
Yeah, I know. There we go. I know some players in this space, not only in Romania but also in Hungary and in Albania. In Germany as well, we have some Canadian company that make really good use of that. I'm not 100% sure of the extent of their investigations, but as far as I know, SERINUS, CEP, Bankers Petroleum, they had great results in applying this type of technology.
Great, thank you. So Raed, is Romania's pipeline system private or state-owned?
It's 58 state-owned, mostly state-controlled. Compet is the company that owns the oil pipeline, and Transgas for the gas pipeline. It's almost 60% state-owned, so state-controlled, I would say.
Okay. Peter, could you comment on the level of structural complexity of the producing areas relative to the Western Canadian sedimentary basin? And we've had a question about seismic, but I know that you have geophysics strengths. Do you have a comment there?
Yeah, absolutely. Great questions. I'll start with the second part of that. So most of the seismic, the original legacy seismic, of course, was pre-privatization. So low quality, low fold, low frequency. Most of the fields were discovered just looking for sort of bump recognition, and then sort of figuring it out as you drill down and develop the field. So all the modern, relatively modern seismic, 2D and 3D has been in the last 15 years. So obviously higher quality, higher frequency, higher fold data, and then applying more recent processing algorithms and interpretation. There's obviously lots of room for more data in here as more private or independents move in pickup blocks or legacy fields, and they're just screaming, these fields are just screaming for more modern technologies to be applied, including higher fold, high frequency data. With great results, Amoronco in the Eastern Carpathians to even SERINUS in the Pannonian, as they continue to cover their block with 3D seismic with excellent imaging results. The first part of the question on how the structural complexity relates to Western Canada, without getting too geotechnical focused, I think of the Romania as the southern and eastern Carpathians as kind of the front ranges of Western Canada here in Alberta, where we've got a triangle zone and stacked structural closures, and really moderately structurally complex. And then as we move south and east of the southern and eastern Carpathians would be similar to moving out into the plains of Western Canada, where we've got some structural components like the Peace River Arch, but mainly flat-lying 4-deep type sediments, where stacked horizons, where you start to play more either subtle structures or even stratigraphic traps. I'd love to talk about that more, but I think that's good for right now. Thank you.
Thanks. Just a follow-up question. Question for Raed and Peter. So with the advent of data or improved data, how do you think that the field distribution curve might shift? I mean, are there gaps that are likely to show up? Are there volumes there that just aren't seen? Are we likely to see a shift in the field distribution curve, or is it primarily mature and we're just looking for smaller things in between?
Raed, did you want to start that, or?
I would give it to you. You're more expert than me in that.
Well, I haven't seen a full creaming curve on the field distribution, but I know there are large gaps specifically at the small end and the large end on the field distribution. Some very, very big fields have been found and developed, in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. And then, again, SERINUS is a prime example of filling in the smaller end where there's large gaps in that field distribution. So I think there's plenty of opportunity, as well as field redevelopment, while applying horizontal technologies or frac technologies to fill in some of those gaps.
Excellent, lots of potential. So turning to Calvin. Calvin, most of the time the big players receive all the attention from the authorities and for the general public. However, the so-called small players in the oil and gas market in Romania can have a significant impact on the upstream sector. Do they have special/different needs in comparison with the big players in order to overcome the challenges you mentioned?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and it's something that I think you have to deal with as a small producer in the country. The focus is, a lot of the policy gets designed around ROM gas and OMV, and even if you look at the windfall tax, that was brought in specifically with OMV and ROM gas and their legacy assets which have been producing for decades. It was brought in as thinking that the government didn't get enough when they privatized, so we'll go in and we'll put a tax on them, but they're not looking at the ramifications on the small producers that have different needs and different cost of capital, and trying to work large blocks and develop those in a quick way to provide the company with lots of growth opportunity. So I think a lot of times they do focus too much on just the OMV and ROM gas and not looking at the benefits that small producers can provide. I mean, a perfect example is, there should be lots of Romanian small companies operated by Romanian and perhaps Romanian capital that should be exploring. They have no reason that there shouldn't be. But I think it's kind of discouraged by the policies that favor the large producers.
Okay, so with oil projects, these are long-term projects. How does the current situation impact the investors' interest in Romanian blocks to be offered in round 11? I have in mind the depressed global oil market, the huge decline in demand due to the pandemic, and also the Green Deal EU as decided to put forward with renewed limitations and financial burdens on the oil and gas industry.
Yeah, that's a good question. We are definitely in a strange new world. The collapsing of the oil price and even the gas price in Europe, combined with the with the Green New Deal, it's going to put pressure on companies, and it'll be interesting to see how the next licensing round looks, how many companies participate in it, because there's going to be a lot of fragile balance sheets out there, and the companies may not be willing to take on the additional work commitments. But at the same time, I think it's particularly for natural gas in Romania and onshore, it's the great transition fuel to other alternative energies, and it has been given a more competitive advantage against coal in those regulations. So I think natural gas should still be a good target for companies, especially with the European Union Third Energy Directive is really trying to promote in EU production of gas, and just from the energy security perspective.
Great. Okay, turning to markets for a minute, and I'm going to combine a couple questions here. Could you comment on access to market for new production? So access to pipeline capacity for internal distribution, export, is that there? Price in the domestic market obligations. What does that picture look like for the entrant into the market?
Yeah, sure. There's access to pipelines. The Transgas system goes throughout the whole country. For SERINUS Energy, our Moftino gas project was 3 kilometers from the transmission line, so that really helped our production. And with that, the way the market operates is you access the pipeline, and then you sell on sort of the BRM, sell your supplies on the BRM market. We do that through our gas marketing partnership with Vitol. So the market has proved that it's functioning. It just became liberalized in 2017, and there's been the previous government tried to roll back that liberalization, and it really caused a lot of havoc in the market. And that's one reason that prices last year were so high versus the rest of Europe. The other thing contributing to that is there's really no access or export pipeline capacity, and there's limited import price capacity, or gas capacity. So the Romanian market's almost like an island within Europe. But the third energy directive of the EU is to really promote the interconnectedness of the European gas market. And hopefully there'll be more connections created for Romanian gas and more export opportunities. And it'll definitely come with the Brua pipeline.
I don't want to cut, I need to leave some time for Verena, but there's a follow-up question about, so what's the break-even price for gas production?
Well, it obviously depends on a lot of factors. I'll just refer to SERINUS. We have shallow gas. Our Maptino development's a shallow gas under 1,000 meters, so the drilling costs aren't excessive, and it's been pretty low cost operating environment. In our Q1 that we just announced, our all-in operating costs with G&A is $1.05 per MCF, which is great. So that's been very positive for us. So I think the shallow gas can do well. For the deeper, I think that's where a lot of the government policies and particularly the windfall tax could have a significant impact.
Great. So let's turn to Verena now. So Verena, where did the questions move to? All right. You know, there's a lot of subtext around, I mean, this timing with COVID, and I know that's hard to answer. You gave us an indication, but is there a subtext? And what's your speculation on when the round will actually come out?
Well, yes, it's hard to say, but again, as far as I know, and all the signals that the new, we have a new government since last November, and their signals are that everything related to energy could be an engine to restart the economy, including the fact that last month the Ministry of Economy has issued an order for all the companies in the energy sector that are state-owned, partially state-owned, to come up with a large investment plan for the future, depending on their profile, like hydro, for example, or other type of investments, which kind of says that this government at least sees that the oil and gas can be one of the sectors that can be helped. I would need to say that it's been a lot said about the past hurdles, and there were the last 10 years. It wasn't necessarily an easy road, but for example, I want to say that the classification of some of the technical documentation and commercial documentation related to the concession agreements is going to be removed. So NAMAR has announced just before this crisis in February and March, officially they have announced that they will declassify the documents, and there will be a much easier process in terms of exporting and sharing data between the companies. In terms of gas markets, from what I see, I personally believe that the gas potential of Romania is probably the winning point, because Romania just undertook in front of EU 30.7% quota of clean energy, low carbon energy out of the total energy mix until 2030, which means about 6.8 gigawatt of low carbon technology installed in the next 9 years. So as far as we see, most of it is through gas, CCG, so gas combustion. A lot of the coal power plants are going to transition to gas. There's already about 1 gigawatt of new capacities that Romgaz is investing in, and we've seen OMV Petrom looking at this. So there's definitely the need for gas, and not only for the domestic market, which the government is trying to also incentivize solutions for the gas to be used as in the domestic industry, but in terms of exports, export was another issue. As it was said before, we were a little bit of an island, because the former national strategy was more focused on energy independence, whereas that concept is no longer feasible due to the fact that we are part of the common market, it is compulsory for us to be interconnected and to share infrastructure. This already happened in the power sector. We are already interconnected, and in the gas sector, besides the BRUA connection, we also have individual import and export connections with in place already with all our neighbors, with Bulgaria, with Hungary, with Ukraine, with Moldova. For Ukraine, for example, you know, the paradigm has shifted, and Ukraine is looking to import gas via Romania if there's going to be gas coming from the south. Or LNG or whatever. And as of last month, Transgas, the national operator of the gas grid, announced that they will offer certain capacities for export immediately for Bulgaria and Hungary, because we were on the verge of an infringement. For about 2 years, the European Commission has notified Romania for not allowing exports. And so, you know, for putting in place, let's say, technical hurdles, because the infrastructure was not ready, but it is now. So for the, let's say, more future investments, there will definitely be a way to export the gas.
Okay. So maybe 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap up the whole session. This has been great. Is there a close connection amongst the smaller oil and gas players? Clearly, the big guys will have influence on the government, but is there a society for the smaller players in order to have a larger voice with the government with regard to the windfall tax?
Yes, the industry is organized in a couple of professional associations. There is an association for the onshore producers called ROPEPCA, for which we are the legal advisors for 8 years. And there is another association for the offshore operators. As part of our advisory work for the association, we've been actively involved with advocating for many legislative changes and regulatory changes, whether it's the petroleum law to address the land access issues, which were mentioned before, in terms of royalty formula for calculating the royalty, or any type of regulations that are, let's say, more specific to the small independents. And I think there's quite a room for JVs between these small, medium independents. As the history has shown, there has been few examples of independents that have come and farmed into mature fields, mostly from OMV Petrom, but also from Romgaz, and they continue to produce. So yes, there is a voice, and I encourage everyone to contact us or look at the ROPEPCA website and join if you're interested.
Could you just comment? You touched on this. So, what's the activity level in the M&A market right now? I mean, how are the mergers and acquisitions progressing or stalled? You know, I mean, COVID-19 in mind, and so what's it like?
I have to say the M&A in the oil and gas sector has slowed down significantly in the last few years. We've seen some exits. Interestingly enough, some of the investors that are coming in are private funds and banks. We have EBRD or other funds from North America helping the small, medium independents or service providers. So that is good. I think after the COVID, the market is going to be rebuilt because a lot of the horizontal services are suffering. So there is clearly a need for fresh blood, fresh services in this respect. And hopefully more M&A from Canada coming from interested parties.
Part of what we're doing here. That's right. Absolutely. Maybe last question, the last minute question popping into Calvin. So how's your experience been using Canadian engineering expertise to assist with engineering construction projects in Romania? And how has that communication between the two countries worked? Strengths, weaknesses?
Yeah, there's as we have our geotechnical abilities here in our office in Calgary for both Tunisia and Romania. For our project for drilling, we've brought packers from Canada, very competitive and worked really good, and some other aspects, some other long lead items. Mostly for the actual construction, we use Romanian companies. They're right there. They have tremendous expertise. So, and try to combine the best of both Canadian and Romanian expertise when we can.
Absolutely. It's always a balance.
Yeah.
Listen, thank you all to the panelists. Wonderful session. Just really great. And as we come to a close, to the people that put this together, Callan and Raid and all of you, thank you for all the contributions that you made in order to bring this all together. And CGF has certainly enjoyed being a part of this webinar. Callan, I'll pass it over to you for some final comments, and then we'll call it a wrap.
Absolutely, yeah. I'll echo that. Thank you, our speakers, Varinia, Calvin, Peter, Raid. Great presentation and great insights, and thank you everyone that participated in this panel. Hopefully these talks will spark some interest, and maybe we'll see more Canadian activity and maybe investment in the Romanian energy sector in the following months or years. Just keep in mind that it's our intention to follow up with a more in-depth session once the licensing bid round is officially launched. And I want to give special thanks to Basha for organizing this web session and for making sure everything worked well. For whoever is still online, Basha will send up a follow-up survey. Please be so kind and fill it in and send it in. And thank you again, our panelists, our presenters, our participants, and I hope to see you soon in person, maybe.
Absolutely, and this webinar will remain to be available on the CGF website.
Thank you.